for every DIY job you do, 10 people will have 10 different methods and 10 different techniques. So the best way to work out what you want to do for yourself is to have a go at all of them. Hi folks, welcome to the Restoration Couple. Today it's the end of our shaker door making series, and I'm going to reveal all 4 methods and the pros and cons of each of those. So stick around and I'll let you know my favourites. Right, let's see if we can do this in one take, because this week is going to be a nightmare to edit. I've shot 5 videos with various videos going on simultaneously. But anyway, we're at the end and we've got our 4 different methods. Now, if you haven't watched any of this, I'll put the playlist at the bottom and at the end, and you can go back to the start and watch each of the days. I've released it as a week-long series. Day 1 was just prepping up all the timber, and we machined down raw slabs of poplar, and we managed to thickness it all, and that's what gave us the material for the bulk of it. We then set about building the router table. That was kind of an integral part of the beginning, because that's how we machined the grooves and the tenons in. And then we moved on to 2 other techniques which were slightly different, and I'm going to go through all of those now. Now I'll repeat my disclaimer, which I've mentioned earlier in the week, which is I've never made a shaker door before. So I had all the theory there. I'd watched endless videos over the years, and I just wanted to try out each of the methods. And then for myself, I know moving forwards which one I might do, which one I wouldn't do, and the pros and cons of each. So we'll start off in the order that we made them. These doors here, there's a set of 4 doors, which are going to be stained or wax oiled, and they're going to be in the camper van. Now these were probably the hardest or most labour intensive to do. They of course are just solid timber. The process for the first 2 doors is exactly the same, in that you still need to have regular planed timber of the thickness you want your frame to be, but it's all down to the setup of that router table, getting that groove that goes through the timber really even on all the pieces. If you're machining your own timber and you take shortcuts, or you're not as thorough as you should be, that's when you get the variation, and these took a good deal of sanding to get nice on that join. But if I started off with the right timber, this would have been quite a straightforward process once you're kind of set up, but it's a little bit more time in the prep. So if you were going to make 10 doors, worthwhile. If you were just doing 1 or 2 for a little cupboard, then might be a bit too much to go that route. Plus I cut these out of a solid piece of wood, the infill panels, so there was a bit of messing around on the bandsaw, and until recently there's no way I would have been able to do that. At the same time as doing those, I built 4 large kitchen cabinet doors, and I did them in exactly the same way, but the only difference is I used a 6mm moisture resistant MDF panel for the middle, and I made 4 of those, and they should paint up nicely for the kitchen cabinets that we've got in the utility. So that's the kind of the go-to traditional standard technique, the grooves and the tenons, and it all slots together. There's something very satisfying about this method, because providing you've got everything cut nicely, because it does all hold together itself, and we've got no fixings in here. So this, yeah, I'd say it's the purist's route. Then we moved on to day 2. Day 2 was similar, but we didn't have to mess around with changing out the router bit and setting up the tenon cutting part to match perfectly into the groove cut. So with these, we already had all of our pieces machined ready, and we just had to put a groove in everything. And we also put a groove at the end of our rails. So what that meant is that rather than having a tenon that slotted in, we just made these little biscuits, which are essentially loose tenons, the same thickness as the panel, so just made from offcuts, and they slotted in, loads of glue in there as well, and everything was clamped up. Both of these methods involved quite a lot of clamping, and yes, the glue dries pretty quickly, but you do need a good amount of clamps, and if you're making big ones like this, then you need some decent clamps for the full width of those. Nothing much more to say on these. other than, of course, for all of these, if you were painting, then there's no reason to use wood. These are going to be painted, but you could use MDF for the rails and the stiles. But I'm trying to weave my way through all of this poplar. And poplar, although I am going to stain a little bit of it, it's a great wood for painting. Tulip wood is what it's often called as well. But there's rarely any knots in it. It's a very pale, straight grained, smooth wood. So it's ideal for painting. Day 3, we looked at using pocket holes to construct the frame. So these are just simply butt jointed together, these frames. And whereas these might be a little bit stronger, there's something to be said for pocket hole screws. They do clamp it up tight. Remember, we didn't need to use a single clamp for these because you're screwing and gluing at the same time. It pulls it in all tight, and the work time, you're not waiting around for anything to dry during a clamp up. And the only difference actually is I had this textured panel to use up, so there's a bit of a reed and bead thing going on there. Yes, I used a handheld router to cut that rebate in the back, which is messy. You could do it on a router table with extraction, but I didn't have the bit for that router, so by doing it by hand it was just a bit of a mess. But once that was in, then the panel slots in. The only fiddly bit really with this method was I had to cut some scraps, some little strips, and glue those in place like a glass bead almost, and just nail that in place. Fortunately for us, these are going to be for drawers. Making the pocket hole technique look nice on the inside is a bit harder and not ideal, because if it was a cupboard door and you were swinging it open, even though we've put the plugs in and sanded that smooth, this whole bead thing going in on the back is a little bit unrefined and would take some work to make it look nice once you've opened the cupboard door. Apart from that, cost-wise, you haven't got to have a router table. You still really need the router, I guess, to cut that groove in there. Pocket hole jig, you can just get the little one that clamps on, so it's pretty inexpensive setup for that. And for all of this, you could just buy plain timber ready to go. We come on to our final doors I've just finished today, which are, I don't want to say it's the cheating technique, but it is really. All of these doors are 18 millimeters thick or thereabouts, so 3/4 of an inch thick on the frame. So this is exactly that, and once it's painted up, there is no difference from the front of this door, which is all made of MDF with no joinery in it whatsoever, to this door, which is traditionally made solid wood and ready to go. You know, if they were both painted, they look very, very similar. This one is where we use a 12 millimeter or 1/2 inch MDF board, the same size as our opening, or the same size as our door needed to be, and then simply just rip down some strips out of 6mm or 1/4 inch MDF and stuck those on. I felt like I was cheating, but I can see the appeal. Much quicker, no clamps, you're just relying on glue, and you could either weight it down or I just put in some really small brads. Prep time, about the same, all of these for sanding. You do need to, on the edge here, this is where, when you come to paint, this is where it's going to show up if you haven't done your prep right, because you'll be able to see the divide between the two thicknesses of material there. So it does need some time spent on the edging, and you might want to skim it with some filler and then sand again and then seal the MDF. So maybe time saved in the construction. If you really want a nice finish on there, you might end up spending more time finishing though, sanding and getting them ready for painting. Okay, time to give my verdict. Let's paint a scenario. If I was going to be building a kitchen or redoing kitchen doors, and I had, 15, 20 doors to do and drawers, then I think I would opt to go the traditional route, setting it up, because a lot of it is, like I say, it's in that setup. Once it's all ready, you can just batch it through. And there's something quite nice. Even if I was painting, I would probably go this route. The only option, if I was painting, that I might consider is swapping the panel in the center to that 6mm moisture resistant MDF. The loose tenon method I thought was going to be my favorite, and the only real difference, that main appeal, is the fact that you only have one bit to set up and everything's going to be regular. But if you're making enough, it doesn't take too much longer to set it up and go the full hog with the traditional side. Pocket hole one, like I said, I'm not going to do that again. I might do the same and fit a mirror in there or use as a picture frame, because the joinery side of things is fine. It's just getting that finish on the back. And then finally, the faux shaker. I think that this is a reasonable way to go if you're making something simple, maybe something for in the workshop, or a painted pull-outs, or under the TV cabinet or something like that, where you know it's going to be painted, and the inside of the door, it doesn't matter what the inside of the door, because the main thing with these is it just looks like a slab on the inside. Compare, they are probably heavier. So you imagine a big wardrobe door made this way, it's going to take some hinges to hang it properly, and I don't know how stable they would stay if you had a really tall, wide unit. MDF is pretty stable, but I don't know, maybe there is a risk of some warping there. Maybe you'd have to go thicker, and then you'd have even more weight to worry about. But I like the idea of that for just simple, small projects where you want just a nice painted finish. Right, so where does that leave us then? Number one, I'm going to award number one to the traditional shaker door. Number two is going to be the cheater's way, just the solid MDF faux shaker door for the reasons I mentioned. Three is the loose tenon method. I just don't think the advantages of that warrant not just cracking on and doing it the proper way. And four, sorry Craig, yes, pocket holes, great making the cabinets, making the face frame, but not for shaker doors. It was quite rewarding to go this way, and really in the long run, not a crazy amount longer to make. I'd love to hear what you think, what you do. Maybe you're a professional joiner, carpenter, furniture maker, and you knock these out every day. Tell me what I did wrong, tell me what I did right. I'd love to hear what people prefer to do. I know a lot of people are doing the MDF style for all the built-ins and where it's painted, but maybe I've missed the whole technique. I don't think, maybe I have. So the best way to work out what you want to do for yourself is to have a go at all of them, because until you've done it, you can't really knock it. But anyway, there we go. I'll leave it there. Thank you for watching. Make sure you're subscribed to stay up to date with all of our UK DIY goodness. I know all around the world people do things in a very different way, so I'm just kind of touching on techniques that I've come across here, and there we go. Thank you for watching. Remember, if you can, do it yourself, and we'll see you next time.